Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Property and Investor Podcast. I am your host, as you know, Paul Lanfear. As you know, this is the podcast where we speak to some of the most interesting, inspiring, and resilient people in property investing and beyond. Before I get started, I have to give you the usual words of my inner lawyer, which are that nothing in the podcast can be considered financial, legal, or health advice. Of course, do your own due diligence and seek out your own professional help. Now, this is a very, very special mini series of the podcast. You'll be familiar with the long form ones. This is a very special mini series which focuses on what I call the inner circle all-stars, and these are some really phenomenal people who I've had the absolute privilege to work with as part of my inner circle mentoring group. And it gives me absolute delight to introduce you to Chris Phillips. Chris, welcome to the podcast. How are you, my friend?
Paul, thank you very much. It's been as much of a privilege and a delight for me to work with you and to be part of the inner circle. I'm very well, thanks, and looking forward to sharing my experiences with you.
Oh, very good. And for those that don't know you, give us like a brief introduction. Give us a bit of your background and obviously what you're doing in property.
Okay. Always difficult to be brief. I should have my wife sitting behind me because she makes me a lot briefer than what I am. Probably hear from the accent, you pick up a South African twang. I am British, lived in South Africa for 37 years, which is where I met my wife. She's also British. We came back here from South Africa in 2015. We launched a property company called CJ21 Properties, and we started building a portfolio. We had a couple of local properties in the UK when we started, and then we built up to where we are today. We have a what I call a geographically diverse range of properties, because we've lived in different places, and it seems wherever we've lived, we've bought a few properties. So we've got some in Somerset, some in Hertfordshire, but the majority of the portfolio is up here in Yorkshire. And we are we'll talk about it later, I think, but we're getting onto our fourth development project. So we branched out into that just over 3 years ago. And we've been fairly successful and very grateful for all the help we've had, and we'll tell you about that later, but that's where we are. So our portfolio is all standard buy to let, very boring, very vanilla. And we manage all the properties ourselves. We have good relationships with our tenants, and that's where we are right now.
And that's the fascinating, that's the really one of the most interesting, well, many interesting things to discuss. But when you arrived on the program, you were already full-time property, financially free. You've been financially free for a long time, and you were kind of building from that base, weren't you?
Yes, we were, and we sort of I was delighted to have joined the Leeds Property Breakfast Group even before we got involved with the inner circle. And I think I must have been with the group it was pre-COVID, so you were having the regular the physical meetings, proper breakfast meetings. And I think I must have been coming for 7 or 8 months before joining up with the inner circle. But why I was so delighted to join yours was that I'd been invited by somebody, I can't remember, I think it may have been Alex, but I was invited along, and it was really fantastic for me, having done 2 to 3 years of other property meetings, and I don't want to get myself into trouble by saying who.
Please don't get yourself into trouble.
I won't get myself into trouble. But they were so generalist, and that I'd got to the stage where I was looking for the next level, and finding your group was fantastic, because that was exactly what I was looking for.
Well, I'm delighted to hear it. So tell us a little bit about, so give us a snapshot of like where you were when you joined the program. Let's kind of start there. So give us a snapshot of that.
All right, we'd established a portfolio of buy-to-let properties that was in existence, and I think we just started our very first conversion project.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our very first development project. That was the one we did in Halifax, and my only experience with any form of development on that scale, which was it was a commercial conversion of a building that was originally designed as a small mill building. It was being used by the Jehovah's Witnesses as an assembly hall for 30 years, and we bought it from them and stripped it out completely, took it back to back to the basics, and then fitted it out with 6 executive apartments. We'd never had experience of that level. The only training that I had, I went on a 4-day commercial conversion masterclass in Peterborough. And again, I'm not going to get myself into trouble by mentioning anybody, but it was a fantastic course.
Oh,
and
good.
I actually still refer back to it. I think it was one of the most comprehensive courses. I came back with like a year's worth of information in my head after 4 days. And I brought this big lever arch file back that was all sequentially ordered, dealing with the different stages of such a development, and I could actually refer to it. So it was a great help. But yeah, that's where we were. We just started.
And I too had visited those same Peterborough rooms, no doubt, and I had done a there used to be an estate agent's course that you could do, and it was absolutely phenomenal. It was like a 1 day, and it was about the best thing. One of the best things I've ever done. And then it was then the guy who ran it that decided he didn't want to do it anymore. He discontinued it. It was really, really worth it. So then, cast your mind back, and appreciate, we are going back a little bit. What were the problems and challenges that you were kind of encountering or wrestling with when you first joined the program?
I think I was dealing with issues around the development, the likes of which I'd never dealt with before, and such as an example was, I had arranged through one of the major development fund, one of the best established development funding banks for the development finance. We'd done everything. The application was completed. It was with the legals, and 3 weeks before they were due to release the funds, because the whole deal was subject to planning. So we knew that we were getting planning. We'd had indication we were going to be getting planning permission in 3 weeks' time. We dovetailed the release of the finance to tie in with that. And we were getting all our ducks in a row to get started on the work. And we had to buy, and had agreed the sale of a small strip of land down the side of the building, which had been previously used as fire escape. And it was owned by the council. We had the agreement of sale with the council. We'd agreed the price, and that was also in legals. And the bank that was going to provide us with the development funding, 3 weeks before they were to release the funds, their conveyancers came back and said, no, we can't lend it to you because that little strip of land's on a separate title. And so we said, well, there's the agreement of sale, there's the price that's settled. All we're doing is we're going through the legal process, and we will include that piece of ground, we'll add it to the title with land registry, and the sale's going through. And that's fine. Come back to us when it's done. Now, with councils, we were talking that could have delayed the entire process by 6 months.
Yeah,
just like that. And that was 3 weeks before. That was just one of the many problems that we were dealing with, and it was great to have the have the inner circle group and yourself specifically to be able to talk these things through with and get some advice. As it happens with that one, our investor who had provided the funds for the purchase actually had very deep pockets. And when we told him about this problem, he just said, well, that's not a problem. I'll fund the entire thing.
Wow. Well, that's definitely one way of solving the problem, isn't it?
Well, that was, I think, plan A. That was definitely plan A. So the answer was that we got started straight away. But I mean, another issue we had with that one was it took us 9 months to get our electrical connection. Just unbelievable, you know. But I think what you're asking is what were we struggling with? Well, we were in an unknown area, dealing with problems the scale of which we hadn't dealt with before. You know,
I think it immediately comes to mind that it speaks absolute volumes that your investor was willing to kind of, I suppose, go deeper into the relationship with you and make up the shortfall where the development finance hasn't. I mean, that speaks absolutely volumes, and obviously it speaks volumes of the relationship that you had been able to form with them, because nobody would do that unless they were absolutely convinced that, you know, it was the right thing to do and there was a real strength of relationship there. So obviously huge kudos for that. I mean, that's a fantastic achievement.
Yeah, I think what helped us significantly was that my partner at the time was already in a friendship or in a relationship as a friend,
yeah,
with this investor, and that we'd taken the time 3 months previously to meet up and to introduce the investor to our construction developer partner, our construction partner, and take him to one of the sites that he was working on, so that he could physically see the quality of work that was coming out from our partner, and who was converting a care home at the time and doing a fantastic job. And he was mightily impressed. So it was that kind of thing, yeah, that definitely helped to give him that reassurance that he wasn't that he was prepared to give the extra funding.
And the finish and the dressing and the staging of that project was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, really, really phenomenal. No doubt if people kind of follow you on social media, they'll no doubt see those pictures at some point. So I suppose the big question is then, how did the Inner Circle program help you? You know, what were your insights? How did it help you progress?
Well, I have thought about that in terms of preparation for us getting together today. And the single biggest thing that comes to mind was we were at a stage, now this was heading towards the end of the year, and we'd completed that project. We were well into our next project with a sort of time horizon of 6 months to finish it, but we had absolutely nothing after. And I went into a real, I don't know, I suppose you could call it a bit of a stage of depression. We were looking for sites, we weren't finding anything. I was panicking because I was very, very dependent on my partner, who was the developer, and he had all the expertise and the knowledge and the credibility with the banks. And I was under the impression that if I didn't find something soon, he'd be off doing his own thing, and that would be it. And we'd be stuck without a project to go into. These things take time, as you know, Paul. It's very different to your standard residential refurbs, which you crack on with. And I mean, I had one residential buy, refurbish, refinance, let out that took me 6 weeks. 6 weeks from date of purchase to date of putting a tenant into the property was 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And that was just that easy. With these type of projects that we're doing, it can be 6 to 12 months. So you ask, how did you help? Well, I remember coming to you feeling very, very, feeling becalmed, to use a
Okay.
sales terminology. There was just no wind in the sails, and I just, didn't know which way was up. And I remember you saying to me, and it was quite good. You said, "Well, you're a man of faith, Chris. Come on, put your faith into practice." And it was quite funny, because it was like a quick wake up call to say, "Listen, all is not lost." And it kind of it was just the support that you gave me primarily, and secondarily from the other members, to say, hold on a minute, you've made progress, you've built a track record, you've got one project successfully completed, you're well on your way to completing the next project, which was the church that we did in Wakefield. Just keep that momentum. And I think what I was panicking about specifically was the fact that I was going to lose momentum. I think that's what worried me. And I can say, hand on heart, that without the inner circle, I was at a place where I was ready to give up and say, well, obviously this is not going to work, so let's go and look for something else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that was a pivotal moment in our property journey.
I remember it well, and I also remember what then followed, which was that miraculously, almost from nowhere, suddenly life suddenly changed, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, success is holding a project in your hand. It's the difference between dismay, despair, and absolute joy and delight. But our next project came along, and as you say, almost miraculously, we found just what we'd been looking for, because the two previous projects had been convert to sell, which was the model that my development partner, had used, and that's all he knew. And he wasn't a portfolio landlord, he was a developer. He still is a developer, and he wants nothing to do with holding property. He wants to build, he wants to convert, and he sells, and that's his model. He's been very successful. So we were looking then for something that we could hold on to, for a property that we could do, and it came up through one of the inner circle members, who I was delighted to be able to bring on board. He actually invested a small amount of money, which was fantastic, but he invested with us on the basis of us taking him through the entire project from beginning to end, which we did. And that was a commercial building in Huddersfield that housed an Indian restaurant and a nightclub, and had a very small lower ground floor flat, which was pokey and terrible. And we stripped the entire building out. We got permission to put in 5 residential flats and 2 commercial units. And we arranged all the finance along the lines of us getting a long-term mortgage. Again, I'm not mentioning any names, but from a bank that we do a lot of business with. And we finished, and so that project came about through the inner circle completely. There was no, if I'd not been on the inner circle, I would not have had the contact, I would not have come across that particular deal, and I would not have been able to share it with the person who introduced me to the deal, who in fact benefited by a small profit share. So you could call that a finder's fee or a profit share or whatever it was. But the point is that we did finish that project. We did it successfully. We rented out all 5 flats within 6 weeks of completion, which was fantastic, and a lot quicker than I thought it would be. They went like that. And we refinanced. We paid all the investors back. They got their interest. They got their capital back. And what was interesting was we bought the property on the 24th of September 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And we paid our investors back on the 31st of October 2021.
Well, there you go.
So yeah, we were, but yeah, sorry, I've blattered on way too long, but
Not in the slightest, not in the slightest. I mean, obviously, nobody ever wants to hear about somebody, enduring those dark times. But what is the truth? The truth is that they exist, and they exist for all of us, and they exist really in every industry. But property investing, entrepreneurship, it's no different. The absolute pleasure it is for me, and I know this will be shared by the other inner circle people who were there at the time, is that we were able to be of some support. We were able to kind of keep you moving in the right direction. And the great joy is that, well, certainly this is what it felt like at the time, is that there was this really dark moment, and then suddenly the dawn came, and then suddenly it looked like everything suddenly had come together. And isn't it strange how that works? That there's that expression, isn't there, like dark is before the dawn, maybe? I don't know.
That's right.
And then the project obviously was a huge success, and I know that and it was great that there was a collaboration in the group. It's not necessarily it's not something I necessarily promote or advocate or anything like that, but it was great there was that valuable project. So tell us about the future, Chris. What does the future look like for you, and obviously your life partner Joe as well? Tell us what the future looks like.
Well, we are I've got to be very careful here what I say. I was going to say we're in the twilight of our lives. It sounds as if we're 80, but we're not. I mean, I'm in my mid-60s now, and time is ticking, and you just realize the shortness and the brevity of our lives, and also of how little time I've got left. So that sounds awfully morose, which it's not meant to be. But it's the reality is that we've got. I would like to take my foot off the accelerator when I'm 70. That's in 5 years' time, and I've got to be very careful and very choosy, very selective over what I do in the next 5 years to achieve my goals. And essentially our goals are to build capital and to build equity in the company, and to keep growing. Now, we've charted that out of where we want to be in 5 years' time, brought it back to 3 years, brought it back to 1 year. And we've decided that our next project would be a project for capital appreciation. What we're doing is we've again, there's been nothing miraculous about this. It's unless I call my wife a miracle, which I think I can do.
I think you're in safe territory there, aren't you, Chris?
I'll tell you what, after being married for 37 years, that's a pretty safe thing to say. But we looked at a piece of ground a year ago, not far from where we live. And the vendor was asking a silly price for it, but we had a look, and we liked the location, and being close to us, we know the area very well, so we could pinpoint exactly what its strengths were. At that stage, the vendor was looking for planning permission and wanted to sell the land with planning, and the agent just said to us, just keep in touch. Now, my wife is like a terrier, and she just didn't let go. She wanted this piece of land, and she kept nipping away at the agent's heels every month. She was through the whole year, and just every few weeks she'd drop an email, how's it going? And he'd say, no, look, we haven't heard anything yet. And eventually, out of the blue, she got an email from the agent end of September, early October, saying the vendor's fed up. He's not interested about planning anymore. He just wants to get rid of the site. He's had it for too long, couldn't be bothered. Will you give him an offer? So of course we put our heads together with my partner, with Ben, on the construction and the development side. And we went back to him, and obviously I can't talk numbers, but we put in a cheeky offer way below what had been asked for with planning. And with a little bit of negotiation, he agreed. So the long and the short of it is that we have a very good site in a fantastic location. There's currently an application in which our architect will pick up, which I think has just gone to the bottom of the pile at the local council planning office, for 12 houses, which, and what's interesting is that this site is on the Bradford SHLA, the strategic housing and land allocation. So it's been identified as to be redeveloped as residential property. So we know that we're going to get planning for something.
Yeah.
So because of the principle being in agreement, and looking at the sort of sizes, we've done deal appraisals based on 12 houses, 11 houses, 10 houses, and every agent that we have spoken to has said, agreed with us that it would, the minimum that we would get planning for would be 10, absolute minimum, but the likelihood would be that they would agree to the 12 because they've looked at the plans. Now, our architect's got to pick that up and got to carry on. But that's where we are. So we're going to do our first ever new build development, which we're very excited about.
That is extremely exciting. So you don't have to commit to this live on the podcast, but obviously I am going to be very, very interested in bringing the next band of inner circlers on a bit of a site visit. If we get our hard hats and our boots on, would you maybe give us a show round when things have progressed a little bit?
I would. It would be a pleasure to do that.
That's very kind.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So that's the future. Excellent. So then last couple of things, obviously I want to point people in your direction. So we'll do that in a minute. Before we get there, if somebody is listening to this podcast, watching this on YouTube, and they're thinking about Inner Circle, and they're maybe a little bit on the fence on it, what thoughts, observations do you have for anybody who's just thinking about the Inner Circle, basically?
I think that I looked at some of the comments from previous Inner Circlers as well on this, and I actually agree that I don't believe that the Inner Circle is necessarily right for people who are just coming in right at the very bottom rung into property. I would say it's more for people that are down the road a bit. They've got a little bit of experience under their belt. That need encouragement, motivation, support, and increasingly a wide range of diverse skill set from people that are in the Inner Circle that are suddenly made available. Which is a huge benefit, in terms of the quality of the people that you've had or that I was involved with. I would definitely encourage anybody thinking of it, if they're on their property journey, that they're looking for the next step up. I would say that is absolutely a sweet spot for somebody who's looking for the next level. That I believe the Inner Circle, 12 months on the Inner Circle mentoring scheme, would take them to whatever the next level would be for that person.
That sounds great. And I totally agree with those comments about that. It's not really designed for people like completely starting from scratch. I mean, there is a set of circumstances in which that would work, but that's not the direction of travel, and that's not the focus. What I would probably do in those circumstances is actually direct people to people in the community who are better suited, I would say, at dealing with those things. And there's lots of people. I mean, you're really fantastic at all the numbers. We've got people who are, experts in the auction space and all the rest of it. So there would always be somebody to kind of point them in the direction to. Well, that's great. That's fantastic. And obviously super glad and delighted that we were able to help with the darkness before the dawn. Glad the dawn arrived. Really excited about this new project that you guys are doing. Can't wait to see that unfold. So Chris, if people have been listening to us and they're keen to kind of reach out, What's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
The best way to do it is just to use my email address,
Perfect.
which I think you will post along. It's my name. It's chris.phillips at cj21properties.co.uk. So it's fairly
Perfect.
simple, but that is the best way for people to get hold of me. And yeah.
Perfect. That works really well. And I promise I will put that in the show notes. So all that remains for me to say before we kind of sign off the podcast is thank you very much, Chris Phillips, for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you. And obviously I really appreciate talking to you today. It's been lovely to catch up.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks very much.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for listening to the podcast. So to discuss property, investing, resilience, all the things we talked about in this podcast, please come and join me at the next breakfast. Links in the show notes. Please subscribe to the podcast. Give it a nice review if you've enjoyed it. And my social media links are below. You'll find those. Come and connect with me. Keep well. Speak soon. And thanks very much for listening to the podcast.